Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar of the spring series, Anti-Social Media. We're going to be discussing well-being today. So please remember to mute your mic and turn your camera off. We are very excited with what we've been doing with this series. If you were on our first webinar, we discussed the negative impacts to people's self-esteem. So today we're going to be talking to Professor Wilson Mertens. She is the Social Sciences Chair at TCC Connect, and I'm Angela Thurman. I'm the Econ and Sciences Chair at TCC Connect as well. So welcome, Misty.
Thank you, Professor Thurman.
So, what is well-being? When you say we're going to be talking about well-being, what exactly does that encompass?
So, well-being is a holistic way to look at health. It's not just physical health, it's also mental, spiritual, healthy relationships, knowing your place or belonging in the world, and also that you have a safe environment. So, well-being is really all-encompassing.
Okay, so if you said, I'm good, maybe I'm good in 2 or 3 of these places, then I'm really not technically well. Would that be fair?
Right, and any one of those can have a higher importance to you at the moment than another one. And so a couple of weeks ago when we were all freezing, we were probably more focused on physical than anything else.
Yes. So when you say, okay, so we're talking about social media, what are you considering to be social media?
So social media is really broad and it can include a lot of things. The definition that we're going to use is that it's a website or application that enables a user to create and share content and to participate in social networking. So something like Snapchat, if you were on it just by yourself and you never connected with anybody, that's not necessarily social media.
Okay, so you actually have to be, and does it matter if you're connecting with people that you know versus people that you don't know?
No, all of it would be counted as social media. So in the definition, there's no way to differentiate between those things. The most commonly used are in America are Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. And the average person has at least 8 social media accounts.
Wow. So let me ask you this, are dating apps also considered social media accounts?
They could be. If you're using it to talk to people and interact, yes, absolutely.
Okay, good to know. So how prevalent is the use of social media in society today?
So the chart you're seeing right here is from Pew Research. They're a very reputable research company. You can usually trust their data. They do a lot of background checking. It's reliable. They started tracking social media use in 2005. And in 2005, just 5% of Americans were using at least one of these social media platforms. Most of them, of course, didn't even exist in 2005. By 2011, we crossed the 51% mark, so half of us are now using it. And today we're at about 3/4. About 75% of us use some form of social media fairly regularly.
Now, is this just in the United States?
Yes, this is just looking at adults in the United States. But what I want you guys to see is that we go from almost nothing to the vast majority of us are using this thing in 15 years. That's a really, really fast change. And any time in history that we see a social change this fast, we want to slow down and start studying it and paying attention to it. What are the effects? What are the positive and negative effects of what is happening here? And so a lot of scholarly research is being done right now on this because it's so prevalent in our society.
Yeah, I do see that. And I mean, I think about my own children, and I know that everybody uses these dating apps these days, which at first it makes me really nervous. But then on the other hand, a lot of the ways that we used to meet people, those avenues are just not open anymore. So it almost seems like some of this is filling a needed place in society. I mean, so that, do you agree with that?
Right. It's not all bad. And I think that's when we talk about social media, we tend to think, oh, this is all terrible. Not necessarily.
So there are some benefits.
Yes. So one of the big benefits, because we're at a college, I thought we should talk about this. 55% of U.S. adults have used social media to learn something in the last year.
All right. And I mean, I'm one of those people. Yeah. You go onto YouTube and you might, I might say, what is, how do you taste wine, or how do you make this, or how do you do that? So I didn't really even consider that social media, but I guess it is, because someone is sharing their knowledge with me, right?
And you can type in the comments. So it's a two-way interaction. And I looked up something I have no idea how to do. I don't know how to make a chi-squared. I know that it's a thing, but I don't know how to do it. So I went on YouTube and I found some videos, and they're pretty good. And if I needed to know this is a nice, easy, free way to go find this.
I actually do know how to do this. So there. But
I think you used to know. Maybe when I was in college, I knew.
I gotta admit, you don't use it a lot. So is what we're doing right now, is this considered social media, having a webinar?
I wouldn't consider this social media because we are using a very limited audience here. We have not opened this up to the public.
Okay, but
I do think some big podcasts that do these interactive things, I think those would be counted as social media.
Okay, all right. So benefits are that you can learn something.
And we also see that a growing number of people are getting their news from social media. Now that can be a double-edged sword, but what a lot of the research, and again, I'm pulling from Pew here, has found is that the people that are starting to get their news off these social media websites, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook primarily, are people that were already not very much engaged. They were already low information. So just getting some information is seen as a benefit, because then they might want to go look up more. Now, again, I know that you can poke holes in that, right?
Well, I was just thinking, if you get all of your news from social media, the people that you follow are going to be people probably that you either look up to or that think like you. So it seems to me that that's going to be very one-sided. And how do you know if it's real news or fake news, or real news presented with such a slant?
Right.
That you're right. I mean, like in economics, we call that normative versus positive. Normative is the way you think things ought to be. And then meaning that there's some value judgment there, versus positive is simply the facts. This is how it is. So I would be wary of that, people getting their news from social media.
So the good news is 88% of Americans now recognize, this is from 2019, that when you're getting your news from those sources, the platform you're using, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is, has an algorithm, and that algorithm is deciding what you see. And over 60% of Americans felt that this was a problem. So we're starting to recognize that we need to be critical thinkers when it comes to the news that's presented to us on these platforms.
Okay.
So it's not all great news, but I would say it's getting better.
Okay.
I find that asking that question 10 years ago.
Right. I didn't know that. You see that all the time on Facebook. You're like, why do I not see anything from this person anymore? Oh, because they're not in my algorithm. So I didn't even know that was a thing. And now I do. So, and I think, I don't know about, well, let me ask you, do you feel like people are becoming a little bit more aware of the importance of protecting their privacy?
We are going to talk about that in depth in a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay, good.
But I do think it's more on the radar now. People are beginning to be aware.
Yeah, I agree.
Again, we've only had this in our society for 15 years. It totally makes sense that we are not experts at this yet.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, so are there more benefits?
There are. And so another benefit that researchers, especially psychologists and sociologists, have pointed out is that social media can provide you with a community. So I went on Twitter and I just picked 3 examples. So the first one is, I do not do this. I don't know anybody that does do this, but if you are a bird watching person, there is a whole subset of Twitter that is just for you, where people share what they saw, they're connecting, they're saying, hey, I saw this bird, does anybody know what it is? And if this was your thing, I could see where that would be very enjoyable.
That is, I do like owls.
A group over here is one I follow, Twitter Historians. This is historians that are on Twitter. So we share calls for papers. Does anybody have a presentation that they want to do? I'm researching this thing. Does anybody know a book I should be reading? Does anybody have primary docs on this era that I can borrow? So that's a great benefit to me. Okay. I really haven't seen any downside from being in that community. And then the last one I'm sharing here is from our own PTK group. We're the virtual campus. So it's really hard for our PTK group to have meetings or to connect with other students. But on Twitter, they have an open avenue to do that.
Okay, I could see that. But then on the other hand, and I'm just being, devil's advocate, could it not be true that some people will rely so much on these virtual communities that they neglect to interact with their real community?
That is something that researchers are looking at, especially for younger people. So those people in middle school, high school, and then very, very early college. And there are some researchers that are very, very concerned about that. So we don't have enough data, I think, to know specifically yet what all the dangers of that are, but it's definitely on people's radar. I did want to share one more thing about community before we go on. Keith Hampton, who is a professor at Rutgers, has done a bunch of research on online communities. And what he has found in his research is that if you are involved in an online community, like a true community, not just like you're on Twitter and you post out and you don't interact with other people, actually involve two-way communication, those people tend to have a more diverse, and when we say diversity, we mean both racially, ideologically, gender-wise, a more diverse group of people in their circles than people who are not using social media.
I find that interesting, but then maybe that makes sense, because if you're reading somebody's post, then you can judge what they write simply based on their words, and you're not making any other type of judgment based on what they look like. I mean, would that be fair to say?
That's part of it, but it's also the idea of just an open door. Like, I would have no way of connecting with somebody who lived in Montana about Andrew Jackson if I'm studying that, unless we just both happen to be on Twitter at the same time and are using this hashtag and we can find each other.
Got it.
So it just breaks down some of those geographic barriers that we've always had.
All right, that's very interesting. Okay, so another benefit, goal setting. So when you talk about goal setting, what do you mean?
So this is coming from McGill University, and it's coming from research that was released last year, so 2020, very recent. They did 2 separate studies kind of running on parallel tracks. And what they found is that people who posted a goal to Facebook and Instagram were more likely to achieve that goal than people who did not post goals. But they were also more likely to achieve those publicly posted goals than their private goals. So they had some goals they posted, some goals they didn't post, and the ones that posted were the most likely to achieve what they wanted to achieve.
Okay, that makes sense, because just even in, I'm going to call it real life, if I tell someone else, okay, my goal is to whatever, run a 5K, then they're more likely to say, how are you doing on that? And they hold you accountable. Whereas if I just thought it in my head, then no one would know that that's my goal. So I get that. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly what the research was saying, is accountability was a huge part of this. People didn't want to have to go back on later and say, oh yeah, I didn't make that. I didn't do it.
Yeah, I was just joking about that whole 5K thing. Okay, I find that to be very, very interesting. But now there's the ugly side. So what are the pitfalls?
So
by the way, everyone Why is it that whenever there's any kind of a bad event, people buy toilet paper? Like, that just floors me. Why toilet paper?
So I want you guys to think of this as very obvious traps. And if you know what they are, you can't avoid them. So this is clearly a very obvious trap if you need toilet paper.
Right.
So just be aware, pay attention, monitor what you're doing, and none of these have to be negative effects. You can avoid all of them.
Okay. Okay. So, funny. Yeah.
This is the one I think that has had the most research done on it. And it's also the one that was pointed out very early with social media. Beginning in about 2008, we started to see studies on how social media affects body image.
Right.
So the first thing that researchers were able to prove pretty concretely was that if you're on social media a lot, so the more time you're on, the more significant this effect is. Right. People that are on a lot start to compare their own bodies with other people's bodies.
Sure. And you know what, to be honest, I never think when I see someone, the first thing I think is not, oh, they have edited themselves. The first thing you think is, wow, that person looks awesome. So I do get that. I mean, this is really funny because that doesn't even look like the same person. But that would be not my first thought. My first thought would be, wow, I don't look like that. That person looks awesome.
And so the thing is, and researchers have found this, we know that there's filters and there's Photoshop and there's editing. We all know that. But just like you said, that's not the first thought that enters your mind.
Right.
The first thought that enters your mind is just, oh, wow, that's an amazing picture.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. I wish I looked like that. Yeah. Yeah. I totally.
Some researchers call this the filter effect.
Interesting. So, and I also found it interesting in the previous slide that this is something that affects men and women, right?
Yes, absolutely. And at first, the research was all about women and body image because I think those two things kind of in people's heads naturally go together. Yeah. But as we started including men in the studies, we found that they are not immune to this effect. And again, the more time you're on, so if you log on 4 times a day for 30 minutes each time, the higher you are to expose yourself to these risks.
All right. And then it basically just ends up making you feel bad about yourself.
Yes. Yeah. So this filter effect, I mean, I picked a very benign image, right? Mm-hmm. And I purposely picked an image where it has no people. I mean, we're not photoshopping a person. We're using a filter on a saucer. And that second picture, even though I know they just lightened it, does look better. Yeah. I like that one so much more.
Yeah, and it's not even the appearance. I mean, I could see how someone, just this picture, if I just saw this picture, I think they're having more fun than me because they're like making drinks and obviously they have someone to drink with and they're having fun and they've got a nice kitchen and all that. It does sort of just get you into that whole FOMO thing, doesn't it?
Yes. And that's something that researchers talk about a lot, this fear of missing out. Everyone is doing this and I'm not. Another thing that's come up from the filter effect, and we're just starting to get the research in on this, 2018 was the first study that was done here. Plastic surgeons are starting to report that people come to them and they show them pictures of their own face having used a filter and say, I want to look like this in real life.
So they bring in their filtered picture and say, make me look like this.
Yes.
Wow. I mean, the extreme of that, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, there is a woman who has made herself look like Barbie, the doll Barbie. And she's had so many surgeries, and there's a guy that's Ken. I'm not making this up. You could Google this. And it's just pathetic because she just looks like it's super unreal. I mean, there's no, and she's had so many surgeries. She's had like ribs removed, so her waist is smaller, and just all sorts of and I'm just like, where does it end? And what's the end result? I don't know. It's become an addiction, I think.
And that is our next point.
What a lovely segue. All right, so addiction.
So experts do not agree about this at all. So some researchers say, no, this is not an addiction, and other researchers say, yes, it is an addiction. I think, again, we're in the very early stages of this. It's going to take us a couple more decades before we have some really solid evidence either way.
You know, though, in our first, I'm putting this in the chat too, in the first webinar we did last month, we had a therapist, and she saw people coming in to her practice that were depressed, in some cases severely depressed, because of, you know, being cyberbullied or having a negative self-image because they're comparing themselves to other people, or just, you know, whatever it is. So I don't see how they can say that this isn't happening.
So the researchers that say, yes, it is an addiction, point out that people who are engaged, again, at a very high level for a long period of time, meet the criteria for addiction. They have neglected their personal life. They are preoccupied mentally. They use it for a form of escapism. It can modify their mood, and it can be that some of them try to conceal how long they're on or how many times they're checking. And those are all the criteria for addiction. So some researchers say, yes, this checks all the boxes. And some users even show withdrawal symptoms when they try to stop checking their social media as much.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know with my children, who are all college and young adult, it is very difficult. I'll say, like, let's not bring your phone here. And it's like I'm saying, you know, let me cut off your left arm. It's very difficult for them to do that. And they want to take pictures of their dinner and of their drink and of their, you know, feet. And I'm just like, wow. So I do see that. But I found it interesting. I think you mentioned something that introverts and extroverts use social media in different ways. Can you explain that?
I can explain just the little bit that we have started to understand with this. And again, this is very, very new research. So essentially, introverts are using it more to see what other people are doing, are using it more as like a window, I think is a good way to look at it. Extroverts use it as more of a stage or a platform. So it does not serve the same purpose for all of us.
I see that. So it's almost like if you're going window shopping, if you're in the window display, you're an extrovert. If you're on the outside looking in, you're probably an introvert.
Probably, yeah. And you can be one thing in your real life, in your public life, and another thing privately. I mean, these are not binary. It's a scale. It's a sliding scale.
Very interesting. Huh. Okay. So some people think, well, some therapists think that the addiction and depression is real. Some therapists do not. But what percentage of us do you think log in to social media on a daily basis?
So this is coming from Swansea University, and they have coined a term, Facebook depression.
Mm-hmm.
So they say 63% of Americans log in, and they were using Facebook as their platform of choice to study, but 63% log into Facebook at least once a day. And of those 63%, 40% log in multiple times a day.
Wow.
And again, they were measuring those negative feelings, and what they were finding was the more times you log in and the longer you spend per time, the higher the likelihood that you're going to have this quote unquote Facebook depression.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because if you're staring at your computer screen, then you're not out doing anything in the real world.
Right. And so some researchers are going to point to high usage as correlating with people turning off their in real life social networks. They're going to pick their phone over the person in the living room with them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also going to find out, again, the more you use, the longer you use, there's a likelihood for social isolation. Now, that's not everybody. Some people are never going to feel that way. Some people are going to feel that way from logging in twice. So it's really about kind of monitoring how you feel while you're using it.
Right, right. And then some people, of course, they're going to get their strokes from people giving them likes, right? So they
Yes.
almost, I mean, if that's the way you roll, if that's what makes you feel like you're, doing well, then you have to log in all the time because you've got to see, oh, I got this many likes or I got this many followers. Which I see that does we've heard again that a lot of younger people have a harder time making real life connections, having intelligent conversations, even like writing a business letter, because everything on social media is, like FOMO instead of the fear of missing out, or they'll use the letter U, how are you can be how the letter R and then you. So I could see how a lot of these things could bleed over into day-to-day life and not be positives. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree with that, but I do think we have to be careful with generalizations. I'm a millennial, and I remember when Gen X was, oh, these millennials, they don't know how to make a phone call. They don't know how to order a pizza if it's not online. They don't blah, 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 blah. So we want to make really, really sure that we are not generalizing Gen Z that comes behind us just because they've had this their whole lives and we haven't.
True.
So there's
True.
going to be a difference there in how they use it because they're considered native to social media, whereas we are considered immigrants to social media.
Oh, interesting. I have not heard it termed that way. That's an interesting way to put it. Okay. All right. Very good. So, what can we do knowing what you've presented? How can we be healthy consumers of social media?
So, I found this donut shop in LA that makes rock candy donuts.
Wow.
So, it's like a cake donut with a very, very rich frosting. And I don't know if you can tell in this picture because it didn't blow up very well, but they sprinkle in that rock candy into the frosting and then they put a rock candy on top.
Sugar rush going on right there.
So I think if you ate this kind of donut like one time or maybe once in a while, it wouldn't hurt you.
Right.
But if you're starting your morning off every day with this donut, you probably need to go see a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
All right.
treat social media like a rock candy donut.
All right. So in moderation.
In moderation. Harvard University put out a study that says, in general terms, we find that a mindful user of social media will not see a problem. Routine use of social media may even be beneficial. Again, you could find that community, right? Mm-hmm. You could learn something new. So mindful users who use it in moderation are going to be fine. But it's very tempting to eat that rock candy donut all the time.
Right, because it's so tasty. So limit the time you spend on all social media. Maybe even you could be like, every time I log on, then I have to go do something else, something like that's good for me. Go outside.
This is compiled from a couple of different researchers, but this is the advice they gave to people. The first thing was prioritize what is important to you. So if you're running a business, you maybe do need to be on social media more than other people. Mm-hmm. And just recognize that that's a little different from just checking in on your family or getting on Twitter to yell about politics with somebody.
Right.
But also prioritize what's important in your quote unquote real life. So if it's very important to you that your whole family eats dinner together and nobody has their phone, make that a rule in your home. Make that a priority. Section off those pieces of your life where you're going to have one thing that comes first and you're going to focus on that thing.
Okay, that makes sense.
Secondly, limit the time you spend on social media. So if you want to go on every single day, that's fine. Set a timer. There are even some apps you can get that will cut it off after a certain amount of time. And that way you're not just on it all day, every day. You're not doom scrolling. Right. And what terrible thing is coming next. And I think also this has been really hard for us this past year. We've all been at home. It's been a lot easier to fall into this.
Well, and there's been so much negative news this year. Everything is just like such a downer. I mean, there's the COVID, and then there's all the
murder hornets doing on a tower for a week.
Yeah.
It's been easy to fall into these traps this year. Another thing that researchers said is remove it from your phone. And I know that some people just cannot do that. If you cannot remove it from your phone, stop the push notifications.
Okay.
Because that way you don't get that little ding. You don't get that little light that tells you, oh, go check Twitter. Oh, go check Facebook. Oh, look at Instagram. Somebody liked your thing. Somebody friended you. Whatever it is. Stop the push notifications. Out of sight, out of mind to some extent.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Take social media sabbaticals. This could be a weekend. It could be a month where you just say, I'm going to log off entirely. I'm not going to check it for X amount of time. So if you reset, that does have a lot of benefits.
Yeah. And I find when I do that and then I go back, it's just like, oh my gosh, these people are talking about the same thing. It does sort of make you step back. And at least for me, it's made me, okay, I'm not going to follow these people because literally they've been talking about the exact same thing and I've been gone for a month. So I think that that's an excellent suggestion.
And then this is just my piece of advice to everyone. We are still very, very early in researching all of this and learning how to live with all of this. We rarely see changes this fast in society. And so we should be paying attention to it. And if you're interested in going into social research, this is a really, really vital area. We're going to need more people doing this research in the coming years.
Now, if somebody did want to go into that, what type of education do you have to go into that?
So anything with statistics, sociologist, psychologist, there's an economic angle to this, and there's some economic studies coming out that we know like social media has helped small businesses or hurt small businesses.
Yeah, that's true. And then we also, in economics, we've got behavioral economics, what motivates people to do the things they do. So that's very interesting. So, all right. So social media is not all bad. It's got some good points, but we basically just need to A, take it with a grain of salt, and B, we need to limit our use. We don't want to become one of those people that's addicted that has to check it every other second, right?
Right. And we wanted to start here for the webinar series with the one from last time and the one this time to point out that there are some good things that you can use it healthy, because in the coming ones, it's going to get a little bit more negative. So we wanted you guys to see that we're taking a balanced approach to this, but there are things that you should be very concerned about, and there are some things you should be aware of. So I hope that you guys will all come to the next ones, because this was like the balanced good view, and coming up is everything you need to be concerned about.
The end of privacy, democracy. What is that? Democracy is greater than social media?
Yeah, and that should be like democracy is greater than social media, ? Because we don't know yet.
All right. And then social media makes you stupid. I would have to agree with some of that. All right. And then do you have the link or?
I do have the link for credit.
Okay.
So if you're attending this for one of your classes, make sure that you fill this out. If you're watching this in a recording, we leave the link up for about 48 hours. So it'll get taken down sometime Thursday night or Friday morning. And as long as you fill that out, you will get credit for attending. Some professors make you do a write-up. So just know what your professor wants you to do and how they want you to get credit.
All right, perfect. So the link to the credit is in the chat right now. All you have to do is link that, fill that out. If you have any questions or comments, we're going to sit here just for a few more minutes, and I am more than happy to pass it on. I'm getting a lot of comments just about what generation everybody is. It looks like we've got a lot of Gen Zs, a couple of millennials, Gen Y. Okay, what is Gen Y?
Gen Y was right after millennials, and I think we now call them Gen Zs.
Okay. So April, you
can't access the form. Okay, give me 1 minute. Let me go see what's wrong with it.
We're going to go check out the form. So yeah, I think I'm a I'm an early millennial. I'm on the border. I've got characteristics of all of those. The form says it's no longer accepting responses. Okay, we're going to check that out. If you are in my class, which is economics, remember that I do require you to send me a write-up. I'm not sure what Professor Wilson requires, so make sure that you do fill out the form and send me a write-up. So born between 82 and 91. I think, I don't know, that might be millennial. I don't know.
82 to 91 is millennial.
Okay, you're millennial. What determines what generation you are? What determines that is when you're born, and you may not fit all of those characteristics, but and you may be on the borderline. So like you're probably familiar with the term baby boomers. That is probably like your grandparents maybe. And then after baby boomers, is millennials after baby boomers?
No, Gen X.
Oh, okay. So it's baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and then Gen Z.
Yes.
All right. So I think Gen Z is like late 90s and 2000s, maybe?
They would just be entering college right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Some of them are still in high school.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think I've got a Gen Z.
I think I fixed the form. If you guys could try again.
Oh, yeah. If somebody would fix the form just while we're here and let me know if it works, then we can sign off. It works. Okay, great. All right, so everything is working now. Make sure to follow the instructions from your professor, and we really appreciate everyone attending and your interest. So, Professor Wilson, if you have anything else?
No, thank you guys for being here.
All right, thank you very much. Bye-bye. You can all sign off at your leisure.